Story number 1. I've always believed that a person's home is their sanctuary, a haven from the chaos of the outside world. But what happens when that sanctuary turns into a stage for unexplainable events? I'm Alex, and this is the story of a night that transformed my perception of safety and solitude. It was a frigid January evening, the kind where the wind howls like a pack of wolves outside your window. My parents had left for a weekend getaway, entrusting their sprawling, old Victorian house to me. At 28, I was no stranger to being alone, but this house, with its creaky floors and echoing halls, had always given me the creeps. The day faded into night, and I found myself curled up on the couch, a book in hand, trying to ignore the unsettling silence of the house. Every so often I would pause, thinking I had heard a floorboard creak or a faint whisper, but I dismissed these sounds as products of my overactive imagination. Around midnight, as I was about to head to bed, I heard it, a distinct sound of something falling and clattering on the floor upstairs. My heart skipped a beat. Rationalizing that it was probably just a book falling off a shelf, I hesitantly made my way upstairs, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the empty house. Reaching the top of the stairs, I turned on the lights. The hallway was empty, the doors to all the rooms slightly ajar as I had left them. I peeked into each room, finding nothing amiss, until I reached the end of the hall. The door to the attic was ajar. I was certain that I had closed it earlier that day. Pushing the door open, I peered into the dimly lit attic. A cold draft greeted me, sending shivers down my spine. Then I saw it, an old photograph album lay open on the floor, its pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze. But the attic window was closed. How did the album fall? I picked it up, a sense of unease growing within me, and swiftly closed the attic door behind me. Back in my room, the unsettling feeling wouldn't leave me. I kept glancing at the shadows, half expecting to see something lurking there. Eventually sleep took over, but it was restless, filled with dreams of whispering voices and unseen presences. Then I awoke suddenly. The clock showed 3 a.m., the witching hour. The house was silent, but something felt off. As I lay there trying to calm my racing heart, I felt it. A faint, almost inaudible giggle coming from the hallway. It was the kind of sound that should be innocent, but under the circumstances, it was anything but. I sat up, listening intently. There it was, a soft giggle followed by the sound of light footsteps running down the hallway. My mind raced with possibilities. None of them were comforting. Gathering my courage, I got out of bed and opened my door. The hallway was bathed in moonlight, empty and silent. The laughter had stopped, and the house had returned to its eerie stillness. I walked down the hallway, my eyes scanning the shadows. Reaching the living room, I froze. The front door was slightly open, swaying gently in the cold breeze. My heart pounding, I approached the door, peering into the darkness outside. There was nothing but the empty street and the whispering wind. Closing the door securely, I checked every room, every closet, and under every bed, but found nothing. Returning to my room, I locked the door and sat on my bed, trying to make sense of it all. The rational part of my brain argued for logical explanations. Perhaps the wind, or that house settling. But deep down, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched or not being alone. As dawn broke, bringing light and a sense of normalcy, I ventured through the house again. Everything was as it should be, no sign of intrusion or disturbance. Yet the events of the night hung over the house like a dark shroud. When my parents returned, I didn't mention what had happened. How could I? It sounded like the plot of a bad horror movie. But I knew what I had heard and felt. Since that night, I've never felt completely at ease when alone in the house. Sometimes in the stillness of the night, I think I hear a giggle or a whisper, but I never go looking for its source. I've come to realize that some things are better left unexplored, and some mysteries are best left unsolved. After all, not every shadow needs to be illuminated, and not every noise needs an explanation. Sometimes it's better just to listen and wait. Story number 2. My name is Connor, and I've always thought that there was something peculiar about my grandmother's old house where I moved in after her passing. It was an ancient, creaky mansion nestled at the end of a quiet suburban street, surrounded by a sprawling, unkempt garden. The house, with its peeling paint and overgrown ivy, had always given me an eerie feeling, but I never expected to encounter what I did one winter's evening. The day was uneventful, spent unpacking boxes and sorting through old family heirlooms. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the dusty windows, an unsettling silence enveloped the house. It was the kind of quiet that seemed to amplify the smallest of noises, making them sound sinister. Settling down with a cup of tea in the living room, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the clock was striking midnight, its chimes echoing through the halls. That's when I heard it, a faint, melodic humming coming from upstairs. Startled, I sat up, listening intently. The humming continued, a soft, sad melody that seemed oddly familiar. Heart pounding, I made my way to the staircase, each step creaking under my weight. The humming grew louder as I ascended, a haunting sound that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Reaching the top, I found the hallway bathed in moonlight, filtering through the stained glass window at the end. The humming seemed to be coming from the room that used to be my grandmother's sewing room. The door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, the room was revealed in the silvery light. There, in the middle of the room, was my grandmother's old rocking chair, gently swaying back and forth as if someone had just stood up from it. The humming had stopped, replaced by a deafening silence. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt the presence, as though someone was watching me. I quickly retreated to my room, locking the door behind me. My mind raced with explanations, but none made sense. I knew the house was old, but this felt like more than just the settling of an ancient structure. That night, I lay in bed, sleep eluding me. The house creaked and groaned around me, and every so often, I thought I heard faint whispers, though I couldn't make out any words. It was as if the house itself was trying to communicate with me. As dawn approached, bringing with it the light of a new day, I decided to explore the attic, a place I hadn't ventured into yet. The attic was cluttered with old furniture and boxes of memories. In the corner, I found a dusty old trunk. Inside were my grandmother's belongings, which included letters, photographs, and a music box. Curiosity piqued, I wound up the music box, and it began to play the same haunting melody that I had heard the night before. Tears welled in my eyes as memories of my grandmother flooded back. She used to hum this melody to me as a child. That's when it struck me. The house wasn't malevolent. It was echoing the memories and emotions that were so deeply ingrained in its walls. My grandmother's presence was still so strong there, in the place she had called home for so many years. From that day on, I no longer felt alone in the house. The eerie occurrences turned comforting, like echoes of the past reminding me of my roots and the love that once filled these rooms. I started restoring the house, giving it the care it deserved, all the while feeling my grandmother's presence guiding me, her humming a gentle soundtrack in the background of my new life. Story number 3. My name is Marcus, and I've always considered myself rational, a non-believer in the supernatural. That was until I spent the night in my uncle's old mansion, a colossal structure hidden away in the dense woods of Maine. The house had been uninhabited for years, left to the mercy of nature's elements after my uncle's mysterious disappearance. The day was overcast, the mansion casting a foreboding shadow over the surrounding land. I was there to oversee some renovation work, planning to stay overnight. The mansion, with its labyrinth of rooms and corridors, felt like a maze from another time. Its walls whispered stories of the past, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. As night fell, the mansion seemed to change. The shadows grew longer, and the silence deeper. I settled in what used to be the library, a room filled with dust-covered books and a large fireplace. A storm began outside, its howling winds and fierce lightning adding to the eerie atmosphere. I must have fallen asleep, for I woke to the sound of a grandfather clock striking midnight. It was then that I heard it, a child's laughter, distant but clear, echoing through the corridors. I froze, my heart pounding. There were no children in the mansion, no one but me. Curiosity overcame fear, and I followed the sound through the dark, winding hallways. The laughter seemed to be coming from the upper floors, but there was something odd. The mansion only had 2 floors, and I was on the upper floor. Yet the laughter was undeniably coming from above me. I found a narrow staircase hidden behind a bookshelf, leading up to what I assumed was a forgotten attic. As I ascended, the air grew colder, and the laughter turned into whispers, unintelligible but unsettling. Reaching the top, I found myself in a long, narrow corridor, lined with doors on either side. The laughter had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. I felt watched, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Each door I opened revealed empty, decaying rooms untouched by time. Then, at the end of the corridor, I found a room with the door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, my blood turned cold. The room was a child's nursery, the walls adorned with faded, peeling wallpaper of circus scenes. In the center was a crib, and above it, a mobile of clowns spun slowly, creaking with each turn. I felt a sudden chill, and the room darkened as if shadows were alive, moving towards me. I heard the laughter again, this time right behind me. Whirling around, there was nothing but the empty corridor. Panicked, I ran back to the staircase, but it was gone, replaced by a solid wall. Desperate, I searched for another way out, but each door I opened led to the same nursery, the mobile spinning, the laughter echoing. Hours seemed to pass, my mind reeling with terror. Finally, I collapsed from exhaustion, the laughter still ringing in my ears. When I awoke, it was morning, and I was lying in the library. The storm long passed. The staircase was gone, with no trace of the night's horrors. But I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread, the memories of the laughter and the spinning mobile haunting me. I left the mansion that day, vowing never to return. The memory of that night remains vivid, a terrifying experience that defies explanation. To this day, I wonder if what I experienced was real or a trick of the mind. But one thing I know for sure, there are things in this world that cannot be explained, and some mysteries are better left unsolved. Story number 4. My name is Wayne, and I never thought my quiet hometown could harbor such darkness. My story unfolds in my family's old farmhouse, secluded at the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods. It was a place of solace until that fateful night. The day was typical, filled with the mundane tasks of life. By evening, a sense of unease had settled over me. The house, usually a comforting presence, felt different as shadows stretched across the rooms and the wind whispered through the trees outside. As night enveloped the house, I settled in the living room, a book in hand, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. That's when the first strange thing happened. The clock stopped ticking at precisely 11:47 p.m. I tried to restart it, but it refused to budge. Sighing, I returned to my book, attributing it to the clock's old age. But then, the temperature dropped suddenly. Goosebumps covered my skin, and my breath fogged in the air. Confused, I checked the thermostat, but it was set as usual. The house creaked and groaned around me, the sounds more pronounced than usual. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, an instinctual warning. I heard a faint sound, like footsteps upstairs. My heart raced. I was alone in the house, or so I had thought. Gathering courage, I crept towards the staircase, each step creaking under my weight. The sound stopped as I reached the top, the hallway eerily silent. Each room I checked was empty, the moonlight casting strange patterns on the floors. Returning downstairs, I convinced myself it was just the house settling. But as I passed the living room window, I saw a shadow move outside. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There was someone out there, moving stealthily through the dark. Panic set in. I rushed to lock the doors and windows, but when I reached the back door, it was ajar. My breath hitched. Someone had been in the house. I closed and locked it, my hands trembling. I barely had time to process this when I heard a loud crash from upstairs. It sounded like glass shattering. Without thinking, I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and dialed 911. But there was no signal. The storm had knocked out the service. The realization that I was truly alone and vulnerable hit me like a physical blow. Footsteps sounded again, this time heavy and deliberate, coming down the stairs. I hid in the pantry, my heart racing, the knife gripped tightly in my hand. Through the slits in the door, I saw a figure pass by. A man, tall and broad-shouldered. He was searching the house, rummaging through drawers and cabinets. I stifled a sob, praying he wouldn't find me. Time seemed to stretch into eternity. Then the footsteps approached the pantry. I held my breath, trying to make myself as small as possible. The door creaked open, and I saw his boots first, then his hands searching. I didn't think. I acted. Lunging forward, I swung the knife. There was a shout of pain, and the man stumbled backward, clutching his arm. Seizing the moment, I sprinted past him, out of the house, into the rain-soaked night. I ran without looking back, the farmhouse disappearing into the darkness. I didn't stop until I reached the neighbor's house, pounding on their door, sobbing and shaking. The police arrived later, but the man was gone. They found signs of forced entry and a trail of blood leading into the woods. They never caught him. I couldn't stay in the farmhouse after that night. The memories, the fear, it was all too much. I moved to the city, leaving the old house behind. But the terror of that night haunts me still. The feeling of being watched. The sound of footsteps in the dark. It's a reminder that danger can lurk in the most familiar of places, and that sometimes our safe havens can become our prisons. Story number 5. My name is Daniel, and I always found comfort in the solitude of my countryside cabin. Nestled among dense woods, it was a writer's retreat, a place of quiet contemplation. But one evening, that peace was shattered, leaving me with a story that still haunts my nights. The day was a typical one, filled with the monotonous tapping of keys as I worked on my latest novel. As dusk fell, a fog began to roll in from the woods, enveloping the cabin in a ghostly embrace. The atmosphere shifted. The woods that were once a source of inspiration now seemed to whisper secrets in a language that I couldn't understand. I had just settled down with a book when the first odd occurrence happened. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. Assuming it was a power outage, I lit a few candles, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. As I tried to read, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I peered out the window into the fog-shrouded darkness but saw nothing. The wind howled, a mournful sound that seemed almost human. I tried to dismiss my growing unease as a product of my overactive imagination. Around midnight, as I stoked the fireplace, I heard it. A faint scratching sound, like nails on wood, coming from the front door. My heart raced. It wasn't uncommon for animals to wander onto the porch, but this felt different. I approached the door hesitantly, peering through the peephole. Nothing but the dense fog and darkness met my eyes. As I turned away, the scratching intensified, followed by a soft, almost pleading whine. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. The porch was empty, the fog so thick it was like looking into oblivion. I was about to close the door when I noticed something odd. Footprints in the dew on the wood, leading to the door but none leading away. Unease turned to fear. I locked the door and checked all the windows, ensuring they were secured. As I passed the kitchen, a sharp, metallic scent hit me. It was blood. On the floor, leading towards the basement door, were droplets of blood. Panic set in. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and a flashlight, my hands trembling. The basement was the last place I wanted to go, but I had to know if someone or something was in my house. As I descended the creaking steps, the temperature dropped, a chill enveloping me. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the empty, dusty space of the basement. But then, the light fell on something, a figure huddled in the corner. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a man, bloodied and injured, his eyes wide with fear. He was mumbling incoherently, pointing towards the back of the basement. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. A small hidden door partially open. I had never noticed it before. The man grabbed my leg, his grip surprisingly strong, and he uttered a single chilling word. Hide. Before I could react, heavy footsteps sounded above us. Someone else was in the house. The injured man's eyes conveyed a message clearer than words. Danger. I helped him into the hidden space and followed, closing the door silently. We huddled in the darkness, listening as the footsteps moved through the house, methodical and searching. Time seemed to stop as we waited, the only sound the man's labored breathing and my racing heart. Then silence. It stretched on, a suffocating blanket of uncertainty. After what felt like an eternity, I cautiously opened the door. The house was still, the early morning light revealing a sense of disarray. The intruder was gone, leaving behind more questions than answers. I called the authorities, and they took the injured man, a hiker who had gotten lost and encountered someone he described only as a shadow in the fog. He had sought refuge in my cabin, unknowingly leading the danger to my doorstep. The incident left me with a deep sense of vulnerability, a realization that the safety of our homes can be an illusion, shattered in an instant. The woods that once inspired me now hold a sense of foreboding, a reminder of that night's terror. I still stay at the cabin, but the solitude I once cherished now feels heavy, laden with unspoken fears. The shadows seem darker, the silence not peaceful but expectant. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear scratching at the door, a ghostly echo of a nightmare that was all too real.